Baboony here, just going to turn on the mic and just talk a little bit. I've been writing some things down in my notebook, trying to collect my thoughts, trying to get ready for nationals, which is coming up very soon. I've been devoting most of my brain power to thinking about Type 1. Yeah, let's take a look here at some of the lists that have been doing well. Can I get an idea about what is doing well at the moment? What kind of strategies are going to be perhaps the top tier ones going into the tournament? This is Gilball's Disciple Herod list that just took down regionals that this last weekend. Like, it looks like a really polished list. He said some things that he probably was going to cut in the next iteration of the deck. Probably going to cut the Pagan Sailors plus stocks. And I agree with that. In a deck in a world where Matthew is the strongest strategy in the game, if they attack you and you have a Pagan Sailor in your hand on the first turn of the game, you basically lose the game on the spot. I mean, there's still a chance he can come back from that, but he's not playing cards that can help him catch up, except maybe outsiders. But yeah, we'll get into that. So basically, Matthew decks are about trying to get ahead early on cards, playing cards like Matthew, who can draw 6, 7, 8 cards just for the small price of getting him out on turn one. And you pair that up with the card Resurrection. So like maybe you attack with Matthew, you convert, you draw cards, you play your Resurrection, you ban to Jahan, draw more cards, and it gets out of the hand really quickly. Or imagine if they block Matthew and they try to beat you with an enhancement. What you can do there is go Generous Giving, draw some cards, negate their thing, draw some cards. You get the picture. Or interrupt the battle, ban to all my heroes that draw the cards, and Matthias bounce you out of battle. And John tossed it next. It's just, if you could try to go into battle with Matthew decks and try to play 1-for-1 with enhancements, you're going to quickly get snowballed out of the game. And Disciples has really powerful late game too because of Simon. As soon as they see an unprotected evil character down, they can just send Simon in, pairing him up with Ride On Victoriously, which allows you to play some of your powerful enhancements on him. So like Simon plus Authority of Christ is just like a lights out play. Or Simon paired it with a Falling Away is really deadly too. Cards that help to keep the gas going. New Covenant. Every turn you can grab a Gospel enhancement from your deck or reserve. Book of the Covenant. You can get a Covenant from your reserve and draw a card at the beginning of every turn. Or Drachma Coin. If you pair this up with Peter, this is immediately draw 4 cards, which is insane. One of the best cards in the format is, in my mind, is Simon Peter plus 4 Drachma Coin. Especially if you have multiple ways to get to Simon Peter and he's running Delivered. That's another way maybe to activate 4 Drachma Coin. So like turning your Delivered into random like draw 4s is really nice. On the defensive side of things, he is using one of the defenses I really like right now, which is a Herod defense. The thing I like about the Herods is that because the Herod's Temple, they can play this really interesting game where opponents don't get to play their enhancements. So imagine if you're in the mirror match and you're playing a defense that is letting you play all these enhancements, but you're fighting your opponents and you're constantly activating Herod's Temple and tossing their enhancements. In theory, you probably edge them out because you're getting to use your value and they're not getting to use theirs. So that's why I really like Herod's, just because of the fact they have so many ways to prevent opponents from playing their enhancements. So Herod's Temple is one of them. But Herod's Temple isn't online every single turn of the game. There's oftentimes it's going to get hit by 3 woes or shipwreck or something like that. And so that's when you go to your backups. One way it's like Herod the Great, choose their hero that they don't have really great enhancements for. So that's like one way to do it. Gilbal chose Pagan Sailor. Pagan Sailor can block, activate stocks, and capture their hero. And there's not a lot of enhancements that can get him out of that. I like Tubal Cain into Madness in the reserve. That's like another similar effect, but basically the idea is I don't want to put my opponents in a special initiative that they can Generous Giving into, Authority of Christ view or whatever. I want to make it very hard for them to do that, to get out of that special initiative. So you have Pagan Sailor / Tubal Cain blocks from Herod's. Let's see, you can just block with a guy with low initiative like Herod's Guard or Outsiders. And let's say they have a big banning chain of heroes. You can just block with that, ask for initiative, and if you're lucky, you can play Feudal Inquisition or Contagious Fear. And the thing I like about these cards is they don't put the opponent in special initiative. Like once you play one of these enhancements as the evil character, usually the battle's over. and the opponent doesn't get a chance to band everybody and continue the snowball. So he's only playing 3 evil enhancements. I'm not really counting delivered. And I'm honestly on the same boat too. Like, you don't need, at least the Harrods can get away with it because the Harrods Temple, but in other defenses, you might want to play at least 4 evil enhancements. But what I'm just kind of feeling right now is that evil enhancements are probably like really, how do I say this? They're not in a good place. Like, I don't want to be playing an evil enhancement that it's just like it doesn't interrupt the battle, doesn't negate anything. It just says like maybe like capture all heroes in battle. Number one, that card is very slow. Number two, it can be interrupted uh, and plays right into the powerful strategies that are going on right now. So if I am trying to choose an evil enhancement for my deck, number one, I wanted to have something that is probably maybe cannot be negated or doesn't give initiative. And Harrods has the perfect tools to those enhancements. So in recent lists, I've cut like Revolt, and even though Revolt is a really good enhancement, it's just it gets into the problem of just giving my opponent special initiative, which I do not like. So let's talk about some other elements of his deck. We were talking about kind of the powerful strategies all involve getting on the board early and snowballing. And like I said, this deck doesn't have a lot of ways to come back from that. Well, there actually is one. It's 3 nails here. This card, you can't really play around it, but if you happen to have Unity Meek Heroes, and you activate this, you basically restart everything. You shuffle all the hands, set aside play area. Notably, all your discard pile stays there, but everyone draws 8 cards again, and this is regardless of protect. So this is a way if opponent went first, played their math, you attacked, you drew a million cards, played everything down, and now they're feeling confident, 8 cards in hand. Well, guess what? You activate 3 nails and you just kind of level set everything. I imagine this doesn't come up a lot for this deck, but it's nice to have like that safety valve of 3 nails or outsiders. Another way this deck can prevent other people from snowballing is Nazareth. If they go first and they play Matthew, they ban to Peter, Peter converts to Meek, gets the Nazareth out. It's going to be harder for the opponent to get their value trains online. So cards like Nazareth, cards like Crowds, cards like Bethlehem Stable, cards like Storehouse, I really like playing these in these decks that like to go big on turn one, because the bigger you go on turn one, the harder it is for your opponent to, try to keep up with you. Let's take a look at another deck that also had done really well. Is Joe Mama's Disciple deck. And it's a similar strategy, but utilizing a very slightly different defense. But the reason I wanted to switch to this deck is that it's playing a card called Akeem. And on decks that are trying to go big on turn one, if you're able to play cards that restrict opponents from being able to set up, that's going to oftentimes be very good for you. So Akeem is one of those cards. Nazareth was another one that I was just talking about. Resurrection Revealer is another one of these cards. Grease of Zeus is another card. If you go first on turn one, you get set up and you look at the opponent and they're trying to draw a bunch of cards to get back in the game. A Priest of Zeus is really going to tax them for doing that. Kind of how Redemption feels right now, where the offenses are like supercharged and the defenses are just there to just try and barely hold on enough. Give you enough time just so your offense can get all those 5 souls rescued. In that kind of format where like there's just 2 ships passing in the night and you're only expecting to maybe get 1 or 2 blocks off. Grapes of Wrath is a really good card for when you do fall behind. Having a way to maybe just block for a turn can really get you back in the game. Grapes of Wrath is great when you're down in soul differential. You can play this on any evil character that you block with and basically shuffle their entire offense into their deck. And it really counters these big banding offenses that are going around. So the dream scenario is they attack you with a big banding chain of heroes. They draw a bunch of cards. You block with your herdsman. You get to draw cards, and then you draw your grapes. And you grapes your herdsman, and it just gets you back in the game. So I like this from Joe Mama. I like the grapes here. I don't really like the plot to kill because it falls into that trap of enhancements that will start to negate war with your opponent, and defenses are not equipped to win those. Stricken kind of falls into the strain trap, but the star ability of Stricken is just so good that you pretty much have to run it. if I'm playing a black and gray defense, I'm even thinking about cutting like Tenants Kill the Sun here, because most offenses will be equipped to deal with this enhancement. I like running maybe even main deck unsuccessful. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't know. Otho's another way to just ambush attacking characters. Because, like, let's say you have a Herod's Temple and Otho out, activate Herod's Temple, block the Otho, and all of a sudden they're in a really tricky scenario where they can't really get out of that. Same with Outsiders. Really like if you're this deck has really good blocks if it has Herod's Temple out, and it's a little bit behind. I think not sure about Ends of the Earth here because it runs into that problem of if you're fighting against another Matthew deck and this is in your opening hand, they're going to draw a billion cards and you might lose on the spot. But in Joe Mama's deck, he probably can get away with it because he's running Herdsman. So if they draw a bunch of cards, you can block with your Herdsman and you draw a bunch of cards, so it's not the end of the world. So I can like see that. But if you're probably not running a Herdsman defense, then Ends of the Earth probably can't make it into your deck. Let's talk about another defense that I think is well equipped in the meta to do well. It's a defense that is the Thief defense. The reason I think it can do well is because of the Highwaymen. This is one of those defensive cards that can draw you an absurd amount of cards and help you keep in the game. Thieves, all the thieves are really good. You can get some really sick, nasty bans off. But the defense here in this deck isn't really meant to, try and get 5 blocks in a row. It's just trying to get one good block off and also maybe help your offense out. So this deck is by Red Dragon Thorn. Originally it's probably from Iron Bread, but Iron Bread did well with this deck, and then Red Dragon Thorn picked it up, and he also did well with the deck. And I've just gotten a chance to stare at it for a while and try to comprehend what's going on here because it's playing a lot of cards I don't normally see around, and it has high risk and a high reward. So it's using your Matthew, your Simon, your John, your Simon Peter, plus a resurrection to try and get on the board early. Once it establishes that lead and get a bunch of meek. Oh yeah, on the side, it's also trying to get a bunch of meek heroes out. So one way you can do that is getting Church of Christ to get unique church hero meek tokens, and get Chamber of Angels, pair it with the Heavenly Host to get more tokens. Once you have all these meek tokens plus all your meek heroes that you converted, you can use Book of the Covenant to go get your Covenant of Prayer, which in turn can go get Jotham. You attack with Jotham, convert this to meek, grab Impartial Judgment. Impartial Judgment says negate an evil card. Each other players must discard X of their evil cards from hand or battle. So basically, you're trying to set up for a big Impartial Judgment with this deck. And then hopefully at that point in the game, you have your Rhydon, which you can use the bottom side of Rhydon to play enhancement on your meek hero. So you attack with Jotham, ban to a bunch of stuff, play awesome things, which can play your Impartial Judgment and just blow up their hand. And to make sure all their evil characters are in their hand, you can bounce them with level Lost Child Found. You can bounce them with the Empty Tomb. So yeah, just a really sweet, innovative deck here from Mr. Bread. It's not as fast as the other Matthew decks that we've looked at, but it certainly has that late game, mid game potential just to absolutely crush anything that's trying to stand in its way if it gets its combo off. And so I've been working on a variation of Nativity that kind of plays like a Matthew deck where it's just trying to get on the board early, but it doesn't bank on Matthew to do that. And there's pros and cons to that approach. Number one, I'm not as weak to Herdsman, but number two, I'm probably not as fast as Matthew, so it's a trade-off. The idea with this deck is you're trying to get on the board early, attack with the Resurrection Revealer, grab your Resurrection, ban the 3 Nativity heroes that all get cards. Joseph can go get Nativity cards, Magia can go get Nativity cards, and then you play your Star Bethlehem to draw like 6 cards, hopefully. And it's like you kind of assembled and built together your Matthew. You had to work a little bit harder for it, but man, when it works, it's just something to behold. And the thing I like about this deck is it can get ahead on board and establish like this really oppressive presence. So not only can I get hand protection down, I can get territory protection, can negate your neutrals with Resurrection Revealer, and on turn 2, I can start putting Herodias down, which restricts your access to your reserve. And so not only am I gaining, cards every turn with Stable and Storehouse, I'm denying you cards every turn with Herodias and Resurrection Revealer and Distressed and stuff like that. There's different knobs you can turn with this deck. You can try to tune it to even go even faster, like add Delivered in here, add some of the cards that don't do anything on turn one, and just like try to go all in. This is probably on the spectrum of where how fast you can build this deck is probably on the maybe like medium. Previously, I wasn't playing Simon Peter plus 4 drachma coin, and I don't know if that's good or not, honestly. But the cards just I'm trusting my gut on this one. Also trying out this Hospitality in Bethlehem, because if you can get its star ability off of Star Bethlehem, that's just insane. Like getting to draw extra 2 cards off of this card is like this card's already good, but getting to draw an extra 2 is just really good. Let's talk a little bit about Lost Souls before I end the video. So in this kind of meta game where the top decks are these really fast decks that are trying to get on the board, and basically you're always in this racing position. And so if you're in a racing position and the opponent doesn't happen to draw any Lost Souls, that's like a you almost lost the game, right? Because if you're just trading Lost Souls back and forth and you have to take a turn off from doing that, like that could be game over. So if you're playing a deck like this, it's really important to have the Lost Souls card, and it's also really important to have Hopper. These 2 cards by themselves usually give you enough to, when opponent doesn't have any Lost Souls, these 2 cards by themselves can give you the opportunity that you need to keep rest green. I think this is so important that I even like playing another way to get to these cards on turn 1, like the Hunter Lost Soul. If I draw Hunter in my opener and they don't have any Lost Souls, I can go get Lost Souls, or I can go get my Distress set up or whatever. Also, if you're playing a deck that is trying to go off on turn 1, having access to as many cards as possible to do that is going to be really important. So Prosperity is a really good card in these type of decks. You'll notice that a lot of these decks are kind of sharing the top same souls. Like you're always going to see Prosperity, you're going to see Lost Souls, you're going to see Hopper, you're going to see Humble. I feel like Crowds is also really good. If you just have the random chance to deny your opponent from even getting off the ground. If they have a insane Matthew turn, but you have Crowds up, there's a chance that there's a chance that I don't know, this could win you the game. So this card becomes really appealing. I like this adaptation from Gilbaugh here. When you're a Matthew deck and you know that only one of the ways that people can catch up to you is Herdsman, like playing Accusers to prevent Herdsman is really smart. I still really like Distressed. If you're a deck that's relying on neutral cards to keep drawing cards like this deck is, having a way to prevent their Resurrection Revealers, their Akeems is really crucial. And I do like just any Lost Soul that can just get you ahead of cards. I like Lawless, I like Darkness. I'm not sure how I feel about Color Guard right now, because the deck you really want Color Guard is against the Simon the Zealous deck, and he negates Lost Souls. So it's like, well, the card that this card would be best against, it's like already negated by him. So it's like, what's the point of playing it? I mean, there are those random choose the blocker Old Testament offenses, but I feel like those aren't the type of decks that you need to be watching out for right now. So Color Guard, I don't know if it's going to make the cut on any list that I like to do. An adaptation we could see against these decks that are trying to race each other, we could see some decks trying to pull out Angel of the Lord. Because, if you're trying to block with Grapes of Wrath, you need evil character in battle to do that, and Angel of the Lord can discard the evil character. But that's risky. Another thing we could start seeing is Peter's Curse pop up more and more. There probably is room in the format for a really defensive heavy deck to come in. And once they find a strategy that works to stop these explosive decks from getting too far ahead, Peter's Curse can really strand a lot of dominance in their hand. So if we're seeing a D-heavy deck, it's probably going to involve either them being able to prevent their snowball from happening in the first place, or having ways to catch up after the fact. I know Justin is working on something. I know Flooded Red is working on something. And I wouldn't be surprised they crack the code by the time Nationals comes up. I know Tyler's working on something D-heavy. So I do think there is room in the format to innovate still. It's just you have to innovate in alignment, all in acute awareness of what these other decks are doing. Like if you can find a way to beat or have a strategy to deal with Matthew decks, like I feel like you can do well. For me, it kind of feels like I'm hoping to win the coin flip of going first. Because if I can go first, if I can get down that stable of that storehouse, I feel like I can kind of sleep good at night against Matthew decks, especially against ones that don't play Herdsman, they don't play Grapes of Wrath. But it's a coin flip, I'm telling you. I got to play against Gilbaugh in my Zoom tournament. The way it all happened is I was able to get a 5-0 victory, but I could have seen it easily happen where he 5-0'd me. If he goes first, if he puts down his Nazareth, it's just like I'm the nativity deck that needs to search to get set up. So it feels kind of swingy in that sense where I feel like my deck is good if I'm on the play and maybe not so good if I'm on the draw, but it's a classic card game scenario. So the question is, do I want to keep playing a deck like that? That's kind of the coin flip, so to say, with some tweaks here and there. Or do I want to try and pivot into a more defensive heavy deck, one that's kind of meant to absorb the blows of that these Matthew decks can put out? That's a daunting proposition because like what are you gonna do against Simon the Zealous falling away your guy? What are you gonna do if you block with your evil character and you have all these evil enhancements and they just ride on like Authority of Christ and kill your guy or whatever? Like, what if you build your entire deck to be defensive heavy, but they go first and they get to leverage all their offense, and by the time it's your turn, or by the time you block, it's too late. So that sounds like the harder camp to be in. I think I'd rather just keep swimming on the ship that wants to be proactive and keep drawing cards, and like drawing cards in redemption is like the best thing you can keep doing. So finding ways to consistently and proactively do that while also finding ways to stop your opponents from doing the same thing. That's like a guaranteed recipe for success. That's kind of where my thoughts are right now, kind of heading a month away from nationals. Let's see, let me check my notes here. I do think Soulhide has a decent chance if they can find out a way to deal with Hopper and Lost Souls. I think if you're playing a deck that's really fast and your defense isn't that good, playing Grapes of Wrath is probably a must. I think evil enhancements that put your opponent in special initiative is not really where you want to be. You want evil enhancements that are CBN or kind of just in the battle by themselves. You want evil enhancements that can help you against the giant banding chain, because that's what a lot of these offenses are doing. So cards like No Straws, Scattered Sheep, Choose the Blocker, still strong. Decks that can play hand control cards are really strong. Cards that prevent your opponent from looking at your hand are strong. If your deck is playing a lot of multicolored cards and you're not playing Herdsman, like I feel like you're just gonna get run over by Matthew. Herd's really strong. Black Gray, still decent choice, but I feels like people are learning how to play around that and beat that. Thieves is really strong. Mary Holy Virgin plus Nativity really strong. Cards that you can set out and kind of lock your opponent out of the game are strong, like Nazareth, Herodias, Resurrection Veiler, Akeem, etc. Cards that help you catch up in the game once you're behind are strong, like Grapes of Wrath, Outsiders, Herdsman, Three Nails. But yeah, those are just the basic thoughts I wanted to share with you guys. And by no means am I going to be 100% correct on these takes. These are just kind of what I've kind of felt as I'm playing a bunch of games of Redemption over the course of all these months and in what I'm seeing online. I'd love to chat with you guys, hear what your takes are about Type 1 and Redemption right now. But that's going to do it for me. And I'm going to see you next time.